So, hello everybody. Welcome everyone. My name is Diek Watts, Solutions and Product Manager at Proximus Next for OT Cybersecurity. And today I'm taking you on a journey that begins in the city you all know, Gotham. Um, Now you might be thinking, what does Gotham City has to do with my operational environment? Well, by the end of the presentation, I hope you will look in the mirror and be honest with yourself and say like there are quite some resemblances between those two um, environments. It's not my intention to bombard you with technical terms or with acronyms. It is the intention to give you some clear images, some easy metaphors to reflect upon yourself and your company or your environment that you work in. To tell the story, we will follow three acts today, which are quite simple and are the basis of every good story. We will have a problem, of course, we will have a solution, and we will have a path forward. So let's start with looking how Gotham resembles to a modern operational environment. Um, if you picture Gotham, a metropolis that never sleeps, um, you also know it can't stop. Like people are depending on it for transportation, for water, for electricity, for safety, just like your employees are depending on your company to be able to be secure and safe to operate with certain devices or certain processes, quite similar in that regard. So they're both large and essential to daily life. They're built on decades of legacy infrastructure. These are layers upon of other on top of other layers. So it rather adapts instead of transforming. You never throw something away. Something that was implemented a decade ago is not going to be decommissioned. You will just add something new on top of it and make it work somehow. So just like Gotham back in the day when it was a small village, it was not designed for the modern threats and the big villains that they had today in the movies. Your OT environment back in the day was not designed for the modern cyber threats you're facing today. And just like the city can't come to a stop because the show must go on, same goes for your OT environments. Downtime is not tolerated. Now, before we go any further into the technicalities of cybersecurity on the OT environment, a very small history lesson. The first OT industrial systems were installed in the early 1900s. Depending on the source, it's 1920 or 1921 or 1922. So I summarized it in 1900s. It took us about about 50 years to automate it because we were like, this can be more efficient. So then we started automating it. About another 20 years, we started to figure out that we connect these devices together to have even more efficiency. And it's also there that the first cracks in the wall were starting to show because these devices were never meant to be connected. And then about five years ago, a little earlier, we had a phenomenon in the world where all of a sudden we were not able to go to work. We had to be able to do as much as we can from home. So today we live in a reality where an old PLC of 1998, for example, is sitting right next to a brand new IoT sensor. We have PLCs that haven't been rebooted for the last 10 years, but still we are able to check that from a distance. So today we have a lot of assets that we are unaware of that are connected. We call that at Proximus the operational darkness. Um, Although organizations deploy extra technologies or extra controls to make sure they get a grasp on it as much as possible, they do fail to acknowledge the basic problem they're facing, and that's actually understanding their environment, really knowing what's going on. Because knowing a part of your city is not the same as knowing everything. And If you miss the dark alleys, the alleys where the light is not shining brightly, a lot of threat actors can do stuff over there that is very harmful to your environment, and you need to be able to map those. Now, a basic reflex usually I get at a customer is we don't have enough people, we have budget problems, and so on. But then, if we look at Gotham, I do believe that they had a lot of policemen. They did not need more people. They didn't need more people on the streets. They had enough policemen. And you could say like we need more tools. My opinion, if you look at the last movie with Bane, they had armored vehicles, automated assault rifles. I do believe they had plenty of weapons. They did not need more tools. And if you look at the movie with the Joker, with Harvey Dent, they were more than capable of locking up all of the bad guys and sweep the streets. The problem there was it was just one hero. Like in some companies, we pray that that one guy doesn't quit because then we are back to square one and we just pray it is a better square. And usually it isn't. There was enough legislation. There were enough rules in Gotham to do what they had to do. So, from my perspective, the problem remains the same and unaddressed, meaning they had blind spots. They had no comprehensive understanding of how the city really worked. And all of that is due to the connectivity. And connectivity as such is not a problem, in my opinion, because it does have some benefits. It makes sure you can have real time operational insights. You can monitor and control your environment remotely. You can do some predictive maintenance. You're less dependent on the Excel guy back in the day who took a few weeks or a few months to map the entire environment. And by the time you received the Excel, it was already outdated. So you can make some decent data-driven decisions today, although that connectivity also brings some risks. Your attack surface expands, lateral movement gets more easy because your legacy systems become exposed and you're not treating them accordingly. And because a lot of the connectivity is uninformed, you get unknown connections. And that's not at fault of the people at the plant, it's just the connectivity within those plants is growing faster than we can learn to understand. And that's, in my opinion, where the risk begins because no matter your generation, where you look for your information to become more cyber mature, whether you pick up a magazine or go to a digital platform or watch some TikToks or YouTube or something, usually you will get a quote like risk begins where your controls are weak. Respectfully, I disagree because, in my opinion, risk begins where your visibility ends. If you tell me my controls are weak and that's why where my risk begins, it is a risk, of course, but you already know there is an asset that requires some sort of controls, whether they're weak or strong. That I leave in the middle. But I'm talking about those assets in your environment that at this moment you don't know are there. And that's, in my opinion, where the risk really begins. Then we get to the second part of an earlier slide, more tools. Doesn't mean more security, it just means more noise. Like I said before, adding more policemen to Gotham without understanding how the city works is not going to solve the problem. The real bad guys, the real threat actors, will still stay under the radar. People, business owners, engineers, managers need to understand that tools do not replace the understanding of your environment. So before you think about applying control to your current environment, to your current situation in the hopes that it will improve, you need to be able to say, we don't have a complete visibility. We don't see everything, so you can't control everything. Then some standard responses that I get is, let's apply some security practices that we know from the IT side. Not gonna go in depth in all of them, but some security practices like regular patching, agent deployments, system reboots, and segmentation or asset discovery. In IT environments, they seem easy, but in the OT environments, some of them are just non-negotiable. like a patch Tuesday. If you want to apply regular patching in an OT environment, you're gonna have a tough sell with the plant manager. If you want to say, like, I need that full visibility on my environment, so we're gonna do an active scan on that environment, that's a bad call because you have a big risk of disruption. Active scanners usually go in the environment and shout at everyone like, "Hey, I am X, and I would like to know who you are on a range of ports." A lot of devices in an operational environment do not like this. There are a, a lot of PLCs or the other devices that if you contact them on several ports at the same time, they just go down. Or like a traditional scanner, it opens a session but doesn't close it properly. It also leaves you with the risk that that device is not accepting another command. So the process gets disrupted. Um, with that in mind, saying we don't need more tools, we don't need more people, we don't want more complexity. It might sound difficult to understand that we do believe in similar tools across environments, and that's because we believe in a different strategy. These can be the same people, usually they aren't, but these can be the same people. Um, you need to apply similar technologies in different environments, just with a different strategy. It is the objective to see everything in order to understand it, and then we can identify risks, and only then, not before. Um, how do we do this? What we call the cell phone sonar principle, like Batman was unable to find the Joker. So he went to the resources that he had, and he didn't went to the citizens of Gotham and said like everybody now needs to buy an iPhone or an iPad or needs to have cameras from Secutech or whatever. He said like whatever is present in the city, I'm gonna use it to my advantage, and I'm not even gonna let them know I was there. So he's gonna see everything, but he's not gonna touch anything. So a passive visibility, and that allows him to secure his infrastructure without interfering. And that's a big something. If you are able to do this, then you can say we have a complete visibility of our environment and we are able to gather some context. If you can combine these two, then you get intelligence. The difference when context transforms visibility into information, then we get intelligence. There's a difference between getting a lot of data on your computer and a lot of alerts. There's a different something when you get that same data with context telling you what a device is, which device it is, how it communicates, why it communicates in that manner, what its operational role is in the process, and what its risk profile is. Then we're talking about intelligence and not about information. That's important to know because once you're starting to work with intelligence instead of raw information, then your perspective can change. I mean, Batman does not replace the police. Um, he augments them. Batman on its own is not capable enough to be the whole police force on its own because he's just one man. Same rule applies to Proximus. Our role is to add perspective through that visibility. Um, it is our goal to make sure that the fragmented data that is already available at your company to unify it into into one single pane of glass to have unified visibility, and that will make sure that you have operational clarity. Um, what do I mean with fragmented data? For example, a few months ago, I met a customer who was on a hierarchy level, very mature. He had an IT/OT division, and he deduplicated his teams between the two. So he had a firewalling team, a networking team, a risk vulnerability team. He had a governance team, both on IT and on OT, working with their own tools. And sometimes they talk to each other, but the data, as you can detect, is fragmented. Each and every team holds a part of the truth, and they need to report towards him, which give the message in their own language. So he needs to translate it. which means it is fragmented. So if you are able to have those teams work in the same platform, then the visibility gets unified because not every problem is solved by one team specifically, but because it's out of your hands in a different platform, you have no visibility on it anymore. So when it is in one platform, you can follow it up and take action. And for the plant manager or the manager in general, in this case, he will get operational clarity because he can make informed decisions at that point. He can see who's slacking and who isn't. He can also see who is really in need of support and who isn't. He will not have to question himself when he's reflecting on his day while in a traffic jam, for example. Like, did I make the right call today? Did I help the right person? Or did I just help the person who was shouting the hardest? If you have that unified visibility, if you have that operational clarity, then you can move from what I call professional guessworking towards informed decision making. Usually, when I talk to customers, I can spot this when I ask them to the operational state of their environment. They will go like, "Yeah, we're in study of a new tool, or we think we have, or we're about to." Usually, that means you don't have control of your environment. So if you don't have control on your environment, your entire environment, then you can't make really informed decisions. You're just guessing what to do next. So when you're able to do that, then you can also move from noise towards clarity within your teams. Today, you have five, six different platforms, maybe even more. They all have their way of alerting, and it's a lot. And it's not because you apply more tools, it will get more clear. You need to be able to have something that deduplicates those alerts, those platforms, in order to enable your team again. Because today, when I talk to most customers or most of the teams, they are quite paralyzed. They have more work to do than they can move. They have more work to do than they can handle. And there's only more work getting on top of it. And budgets of customers do not allow the hiring of extra people. So the problem is not being solved. It's getting worse. To do so, you need a multidisciplinary team because OT is not a one-man show. It's not a solo discipline. It's a team story. You really need a domain specialist who knows OT from the inside out. For example, you need a technology expert that is able to master the tools and ensure that it's correctly deployed. Um, and you need a solution expert who can translate the solution itself towards the business requirements of the company itself. When you went through all that hassle, you can start understanding your adversaries because depending on your company, depending on the nature of your company, you will have different adversaries. Not everybody has the same goal. Some people just do it for fun. Other people do it for financial gains, geopolitical reasons. Um, Depending on what your company is doing, you need to be worried about different people. We have two different views on this. It is important to understand that no matter which route we take, the end goal is the same. So we can either start from looking your attack surface view, then we will look from which factors you're exposed, or we can look at your asset-centric view, which means we will look at your crown jewels or your golden nuggets that we want to harden first, and then we will work from the outside in. But again, I will repeat, it is important to know that the end goal is exactly the same. Few frameworks we can use for this. One of my favorites is the CTEM framework, uh, continuous threat exposure management. If you haven't heard of this yet, I do urge you to do your own research afterwards because this is something that would take me an hour to explain in depth. I will go over it quite fast. Like with the CTIM framework, we will look at what is it that we try to protect at first. Then we will discover what is within the scope. We will make prioritizations depending on your business and criticalities. We will validate whether we are going to address the problems that we discover, and then we will mobilize. You could ask, why are we going to validate whether we're going to solve something? Because especially in the OT space, something is not always solvable. Back in the day when I was an engineer, I do remember a customer that had a malware running in his OT environment on a quite critical system that was running before I was born. And the OEM did not promise us that the system would boot again because remediation did require a reboot. So the customer decided we would build a wall around it, for example. So the immediate response is not always the right response. The other view is having the visibility and the monitoring on your entire environment. And that means we need to gain the OT visibility about knowing which assets you have, knowing the state of your assets, and knowing how they behave without interrupting your operations. Also, quite important to know is, on average, according to a report of armies themselves, about 30% of your connected devices to your network are unknown. To our experience from our deployments, we see that this is often plus 50%. Take that in mind. If you say today I have all the controls in place and I am cyber secure, you're applying those controls only to, at tops, 70% of your environment. Because what you're not seeing today, you're not applying those controls to. Take that into account, please. The Proximus principle is with a famous quote of the Joker, which I'm a fan of. I'm not crazy, I'm just ahead of the curve. We do have a different approach from the competition. Our goal is not to replace everything. We don't swoop in and say, like, you need to replace software A, B, or C, or platform A, B, or C. It is our goal to understand everything. We're going to integrate with what you have. We're going to enhance it, meaning your teams, and we will elevate it, meaning your company. Um, that's how we want to work with our customers. Um, if you go to your trusted advisor, which I hope you have for this matter, a few key principles to discuss is that when you talk about passive visibility in your environment, it needs to be technology agnostic. And technology agnostic does not mean it needs to be vendor agnostic, because that's something else. It shouldn't care whether we are talking about IT, IoT, OT, medical equipment, building management systems, or another technology stack that someone will invent to have a leadership position with their specific product somewhere. Your tool or your solution or your platform that provides you the complete visibility over your entire environment should not care about the nature of the technology. It should also be non-intrusive, should be continuous, because a snapshot today is not relevant anymore. Back in the day, we did snapshots. Today, it needs to be continuous. It needs to be able to cut through the noise, which means it needs to deduplicate your assets. Like I said before, I can guess most of you have 4 to 6 or 7 different platforms to monitor your environment, and they all hold a part of the truth. When something happens in your environment, or when you want to look up for something, then you need to extract a CSV file. You need someone with a lot of Excel knowledge to make sure that the pivot table is correct. And then you need to look for your assets over there. And there's always something with that pivot table. So if you have a platform or a solution that can deduplicate those assets for you, then a lot of effort is already done in your place. It needs to be able to work with legacy systems. It needs to be able to cope with brownfield and greenfield systems at the same time, because that's the reality today. And it needs to have a converged visibility. I hope that this part is tr- clear, because that's the core message. We want to converge the visibilities you have today. All the different platforms you're using today to have some sort of a control in your environment, we want to make sure you can see it from one single pane of glass, to make each and every team that is rooting for their own sports club to root for the same sports club. We want to eliminate the technology gap and the translation gap between the different teams, um, so that you get more clarity on how to operate your environment. So the cost of operation goes down, that the way you operate your environment will become more easy. That's the main goal. When you talk about gaining that visibility, these are key principles you need to discuss with your trusted advisor. At Proximus, we have a program for this, existing out of 5 steps. There are two main steps, in my opinion. Like, we will map your current environment, the as is situation. We will benchmark it towards what it needs to be, which is specific to each and every business, depending on your vertical, depending on your business. Specifically, the benchmark will be different. And we will give you a gap analysis with the prioritization with which things you need to address first. Because you might be having devices that have critical vulnerabilities, I dare say, but depending on how vulnerable the device is from the outside, you might be looking first at vulnerabilities that have a medium impact, but those devices are external facing because those are your doorway in to your environment. And you need to address those before you have those isolated devices with critical vulnerabilities on it. Just to give an example. We can build roadmaps accordingly, and we can help you with services to realize those roadmaps. So in that regard, I would say let us manage your concerns if you have any. We can do that with governance, risk and compliance services, tax service management, design authority, or care and consultation services. Um, to close off this webinar, usually I ask what stands out in this picture. Since you guys are unable to reply, I will go to the most common answers that I get from my audience. Um, People often go like, "That car is very armored, looks very slow, has big guns on it to defeat the bad guys." Usually people miss the fact that this car also has big wheels on it, a very complicated suspension system. And if I was able to render it with AI, I would also make a picture of the brake calipers. Because often people or business owners think that cybersecurity slows down the business, but it doesn't. Safety enables speed, um, from my understanding. I mean, the engine is the business. You guys come with the ideas, with the strategies, with the innovation. But the foundation, in order to execute those, lie in cybersecurity. If your suspension is not correctly set up, if the tires are not fit for the surface you're riding on, and if your brake calipers are not big enough, and the boss asks you to put the pedal to the metal, and you come into a corner, then you will start doubting, because am I going to make this corner? So if you have your cybersecurity measurements in place, then you can accelerate your business because you can do acquisitions, you can take up a new team, you can onboard new technologies without having to fear that it will impact your business, that it will impact your way of working. So if you take that into account, security isn't only the armor that slows you down, it is also the suspension and the braking system that allows you to move faster without risks. And with this as a final sentence, I would like to thank you for your time and attention. And if there are any challenges you recognize in your own environment, I do love to hear about it.
Proximus Next. Inspired by tech, driven by people.